photos of teenage boys captioned, "I want to see that smile every day." I bet he would have tried really hard and got flowers and everything, the cutie. Who are these boys? Actors? Musicians? Maybe some sort of influencer? They're photos of the high school Columbine massacre shooters, and these are the kids that worship them.
Two young men apparently dressed in long black trench coats opened fire.
There's a few things that just scream America. Apple pie, bald eagles, and school shooters. There's been a fascination and intrigue with true crime since the dawn of media, and during the heyday in the 80s of serial killers, we would see on the front pages of magazines and daytime DVE these so-called groupies and devoted fangirls to the likes of Richard Ramirez. People coveting disgusting humans committing the worst acts. And as people migrated from the TV to the internet, we would see the same energy in a new light. Where serial killers phased out, school shooters phased in, and the fandom probably grew tenfold from it. In particular, the social media website Tumblr would craft a really large true crime community that would have a subcategory called Columbiners. April 20th of 1999 would mark itself as an unforgettable day in American history. The small town of Littleton, Colorado's Columbine High would find itself as the victim of a senseless, deadly attack. Two students at the school, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, would set up propane bombs in the lunchroom which would fail to detonate, leading to the two armed with guns purchased for them by an older friend. They would go into the school, stalking the halls, killing their peers and teachers. They would kill 13 individuals inside the school, injuring another 23. They would proceed to the school library where they would take their own lives. This was the largest school shooting to have been committed in American history in 1999, and this dawned a giant media frenzy of people just trying to figure out why two kids would attack their own. Claims of being outcasted, bullied loners who only had each other, which time and time again has been discredited. The fact that they listened to music that possibly made them violent, or they played games that did that, even tossing out the concept that certain medications led to the giant lapse in judgment by the two. But the reality is that some people, even teenagers and children, can become obsessed with causing violence and carnage without a single thought for anyone else, with no outside forces influencing them. And somehow, here we are, 26 years later, and Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold still have their hands in the death of children all the way from past their grave. America specializes in sensationalism, and the way Columbine was sensationalized will genuinely always be a focal point in American culture. The permanent association surrounding trench coats, violent music, and violent video games will make people violent, and being set as the gold star bar of any reference to school shootings. Anytime you see anyone mention one, Columbine is always brought up. The after facts are so prevalent that it has been studied and labeled as the Columbine effect by professionals. The forever echoes of this American tragedy will never not be heard. This creates total infamy, which was an outright goal of the two shooters, and I don't think these idiots would have ever comprehended the true infamy they would have. And where there's infamous people, there are worshippers. If you're unfamiliar with the social media site Tumblr, it was a website where you can make your own blog, totally customize it, colors, pictures, you could have your own posts. It had a really easy navigation system of hashtags, and it was just generally a really easy place to form large communities from K-pop, movies, fashion, and in particular, as we're discussing today, in the 2010s, there was a very, very large and active true crime community on there. And people that were in this were very serious about it. There were long, really informative posts, plenty of references, sometimes information you could not find anywhere else from watching general documentaries or reading books. People took this so serious. And when you would look up Columbine, you'd be met with, really meticulous details of things. Photos, references, crime scene, etc. Anything that kind of fell into the realm of normal true crime internet viewership. But if you just went into the tag and simply added an R to the end of it, you would be met with something astronomically different. Full-fledged anime fan art, edits with videos and kawaii filters on top, thirst posts yearning for the two dead school shooters, blogs upon blogs devoted to their undying obsession and even self-proclaimed love for Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. To this day, even with the extreme fallout of users and active people on the website Tumblr as a whole, you will find a bunch of blogs of young, typically girls, proclaiming their love, cosplaying, making edits, preaching their devotion and understanding to two dead boys who at this point have ceased to exist for probably a decade before their own birth and who killed 13 people. But without a doubt, it was the mid-2010s that this was the absolute high point of the activity and members in this community. Quite literally, the only equivalent of the obsession of certain Columbiners is to 2000s boy bands. Like, genuinely, that is the best way for me to put it. Shrines, posters, merch, like, again, they're curating their online identity within them, and they take it outside of online just as much. The community becomes an all-consuming point of identity. The interests of Eric and Dylan, be it playing Doom or listening to German industrial bands, will be adopted by these Columbiners, even dressing the same. It's extremely common to see them in self-made or purchased, or I have seen posts of people saying their parents made them these shirts, which I'm just hoping their parents don't understand, because that would make it a lot better, of the t-shirts the two kids made to wear during the shooting. In relation, I think Dylan wore a black shirt that in red words said Wrath, and Eric Harris wore a white shirt that said Natural Selection and black lettering. I will note, there was a fashion company that was making hoodies of merchandise for schools that had very prolific shootings covered in fake blood. America. I'm just trying to hammer home to you how truly intense their obsession and fixation with the boys in. It is hard to find this within other online communities. I genuinely think the closest you can find in relation to something you might know of is like the K-pop people. Like, it's at that level of just obsession. And this is not a thing of the past. Yes, it was way more prevalent in the 2010s, but this is a current standing problem. Just this year, a 13-year-old girl took her life seemingly in connection with her obsession with the Columbine school shooters. She'd become fully consumed into the Columbine community and unfortunately take her own life. And it wasn't until after that her parents knew what she was doing online and fixating on. She even asked her mother to make a copy of a t-shirt Eric Harris owned, which her mother at the time didn't know about any of this. And the way she found out this was a t-shirt Eric Harris owned was from photos of the 15-year-old Natalie Rupnow in the same shirt, who just in December of 2024 brought a gun to her school, killing 2 people, injuring 6, and then turning the gun on herself. Which I will say, this t-shirt all of this is about is from a really amazing band I'm personally a giant fan of, and unfortunately have shirts with the logo, because of course I do, and it's just so upsetting how still 25 years later, things and people are being demonized outside of their control just because 2 teenage losers had a shirt, and now there's all these different teenagers fixated on them. Like, it's just genuinely upsetting to me just how much crap they've just ruined. Natalie was going by Samantha on her socials, which were all covered in school shooter references, Nazism, guns, and general disdain for humanity. She wasn't explicitly a Columbiner, but her Tumblr did have plenty of reblogs of Eric and Dylan, from memes to sympathetic pseudo-analyses of the shooters during the attack, and plenty of other shooters as well. Even all her profile pictures on quite literally every social media site was some sort of shooter. Her online activity in relation to her escalation of going to her school and shooting people may seem quick, just taking place within a few years, but that is kind of the bar of how it is with these people that become infatuated with them. Like the 13-year-old girl I mentioned, it quite literally was a matter of 4 months, seemingly, of what they can find of when she got into it and when she unfortunately took her own life. Like I said, her parents had no clue what she was going into interest about until after her death. Once going through her journals and seeing rampant journaling about Columbine and how she too felt isolated by her bullying at school. Along with these was the writings of her crush on Dylan, even writing her name over and over in this journal as her first name and Klebold as the last. Which I'm bringing up this point of reference because it's really troubling as someone who was a young girl about the scribbling in your notebook, like, the boy you have a crush on or the celebrity you have a crush on as their last name as your own last name is such a standard, like, young girl activity. Like, I feel like every young girl's done this once or twice. And to see a 13-year-old girl do this about a school shooter is just so absolutely, it's just insane to hear about. And she was a 13-year-old girl. I don't blame this 13-year-old girl. She doesn't really comprehend the world as a whole yet, because no 13-year-old does. It's just so troubling to see such a normal activity that has this edge of, like, horror. She's not alone in this thought process of having a crush onto Dylan. The mass amounts of posting about the boys is just insane proclamations of love or attraction by Columbiners. Full-blown explicit your name fan fictions, drawings, text posts, genuine smut of just people fawning after these two ugly school shooters. Which I will say, sidebar, the reason I have this from a reference is because I was a teenager on the, like, just true crime, like, more the, like, serial killer unsolved mystery part of Tumblr during all of this. So I remember occasionally you'd see some stuff go down, and more in particular, I remember probably the most infamous failed shooting to take place by Columbiners, which we're going to be discussing in a minute, to take place. But let's get back to, there was someone who said they were communicating with the ghost of Dylan. This was all genuine. These were not, like, joke posts. There was someone who was saying they were genuinely communicating with the ghost of Dylan, and they were, like, doing foot stuff with each other, because I guess in Dylan's diary he expressed being interested in people's feet. So someone was, like, making these giant thread text posts and, like, answering questions about it, that they were, like, having foot play post-mortem ghost communication with Dylan Klebold. If anyone was around during this time, if I can find it, I'm going to put it here, but if anyone was around and remember this, please comment down below. It's worth noting, a Columbine fandom before Tumblr did exist to a degree. It seems around 2007 to 2010, there's a lot of fan-made videos being uploaded here onto YouTube, and it's even more interesting that these were predominantly, like, young men doing it versus the predominantly young female groupings we do see on Tumblr. YouTube eventually, like, updated their policies around stuff like that, so almost every single one of these videos got taken down. They were all really reminiscent to the home videos that the two boys made themselves, and I think just the mass amount of content they created on their own is why they have such an innate following of people. Between the journal entries, the home videos, and the fan-made films, there's constant options for people to find their own personal relation to. And they covet this media, because that's where the interest really comes down to. It's them relating to the shooters, which we will get into at the end of this video, of course, why people are into this. I also do want to personally vaguely blame Ryan Murphy and making Tate Langdon or whatever. American Horror Story Season 1, the Tate, the little school shooter boy, this was around this time, and he would be edited into the same fan edits and GIFs with the Columbine shooters. It was another just little extra zest to people getting obsessed. Their posts are always making constant reference to some sort of media involving the boys, even buying physical copies of their journals, because the journals are, like, the biggest coveted piece to everyone, even though it's like, if you're so obsessed with this dude, you're reading his journal without his, it doesn't matter. You also see this giant reference to the basement tapes, which sounds a lot cooler than what it is. The basement tapes are now considered lost media. They were tapes the boys made in a basement. Shocking, I know. But in this, they were listing out the reasons they did the school shooting, apparently. And from what has been released by the police about what they watched on the tapes, since they have claimed they have all been destroyed after viewing, it says it was, like, just dumb, mundane stuff. Like, they literally were like, oh, we should kill them because, you know, she pissed me off. Like, stuff like that. And I believe they said there wasn't an explicit hit list, because there wasn't. There's this, I think Eric Harris had, like, a hit list on one of his websites, but you could tell by, they put propane tanks in the cafeteria. That's not a hit list. That's targeting as many people as you possibly can. But with this amount of innate obsession and activity online in a grouping, there's going to be people that start garnering their own fan bases within it. And that would be the case with 19-year-old James Gamble, who on the site was better known for his blog name, Shallow Existences. James was one of the few boys deemed attractive by the school shooter girls gooning over dead boys, so he did start getting his own quite bit of traction on the site. His blog was a school shooter focused one with various sprinkles of gore, depression quotes, and of course Nazism. One day on the Columbine tag, he would see a meme showing the post-mortem bodies of Eric and Dylan, parodying the at-time popular Just Girly Things post caption saying, quote, "I can't live without my friends," unquote. This meme would inevitably lead to him connecting online with the girl who made it, 23-year-old Lindsay Savaranth, going by... I don't know if I could say that to you, and I kind of don't want to say it to you. This would be a deadly connection, resulting in James' death and a failed mass shooting plot. Lindsay was an out and proud neo-Nazi, even though she herself was half Asian, and she found her radicalization through DeviantArt. I wish I couldn't make up a funnier backstory to a total idiot. On DeviantArt, she befriended a National Socialist artist, and then she herself started making her own Nazi art, homophobic comics, which I think got her kicked off, and self-insert Nazi necrophilia art. Brother, you ever say some words together you don't think you're ever gonna say? She was soon dating a very large neo-Nazi head platformer of the Iron March, who eventually broke up with her by sending her photos of his new girlfriend, and then Lindsay made really weird comparison memes and like threatening edit posts and saying how much, she wants to kill her, yada yada yada. So Lindsay's evolution into a school shooter fangirl made complete and total sense, especially a Columbine shooter fangirl, as they themselves were obsessed with Nazism, writing, proclaiming their agreement with it, and all of the likes. Soon after Lindsay and James began chatting on Facebook Messenger, it quickly turned into an dating romance story, including an intensely troubling shared delusion between the two. At some point between their private Facebook messages, and Lindsay herself has supported it, her and James believed that they were somehow Eric and Dylan. Not figuratively, but genuinely. On our interview with the Nighttime podcast, she said, quote, "We thought we were actually them somehow. Not exactly reincarnations, but more like their spirits had found their ways to us, and we were them," unquote. They even started to referring to each other as the nicknames the two shooters used, Reb and Vodka, and when you went on their blogs respectively, you would have the other's nickname, and you would click the link and it would send you to the other person's blog. And this was a very common practice in the community. Most people would pair up with each other and pick a name for one another. But outside of this personal chit-chat, would be the half-assed planning of a mass shooting in Jamestown of Halifax on Valentine's Day of 2015. Nearly every single aspect of their planning for this attack was influenced by Eric and Dylan in some way, because once again, in their heads, they are Eric and Dylan, but it wouldn't just be the two that were going to carry out this act. There'd be a third involved. James's friend, Randall Shepard, who he himself ran a gore, semi-school shooter-esque blog on Tumblr, because of course he did. James and Lindsay's plan was to lose their virginities to each other and then go to the food court of the mall, each having a gun and armed with Molotov cocktails to kill as many people as their weapons would allow, and proceed to fill themselves, ending their own lives after the attack. It does seem, objectively, that Randall was just some sort of add-on or tool even for James and Lindsay. I have seen some record that they were planning on just killing Randall before the attack started or during the attack themselves. No clue why. Ultimately, neither of those occurrences would happen, but it just seems like Randall was weirdly tacked onto this, and it's like kind of odd. The two were also dumb enough to make essentially promotional posters for their mass attack, with photos edited of the two of them, the text on top saying Der Untergang and Valentine's Day. It's going down. Der Untergang is a Nazi reference to, I believe it's a film about the last 8 or 10 days of the reign of the Reich in Germany. They're just so... Here's the thing, it's literally saying, like, the edgiest teenagers in the world, even though Lindsay's literally 23. I can't get over the fact that a 23-year-old was doing this. I was 23 2 years ago, and this is... It's wild. And they stayed completely active online during all this. Besides their promotional posting, they just behaved normally. Even on February 8th, an anon asked James on his blog, "Do you have combat boots like Dylan?" He replied, "Indeed I do," and posted a photo of himself wearing the boots and holding a long gun and hunting knife. This gun, I believe, is the one he would use just a few days later to take his own life. February 12th, 2 days before the planned shooting, the RCMP received an anonymous tip from Crime Stoppers that 3 people were planning a shooting at the Halifax shopping center on Valentine's Day. The next day, just 24 hours before their planned massive attack, Randall was driving to the airport to pick up Lindsay to take her over to James, where, unbeknownst to him, Lindsay was already stopped at the border, which, just a fun little side note, she sold Neopets to afford the trip to Canada. But Lindsay was stopped due to the fact she had a beanie with a swastika, no ticket back, and was just being really genuinely odd at questioning it at the border because she's socially illiterate. Around this same time, the police were already outside of James's house, questioning his parents, who, unknown to everyone at the time, James was inside, upstairs in his bedroom, and had already taken his own life, using one of the guns planned to be used for the attack the next day. To this day, it is completely unknown who called in this anonymous tip. Many believe that it was James himself, which, if you read through his and Lindsay's messages, he expresses his constant desire to just end his life, which usually Lindsay just reassures him how much better it would be to end it along with her own. But they were also making literal marketing posts about their shooting, so it would be no surprise to me if they told people about it, either online or in person, that, like, it's a nice sentiment that maybe James is the one that called it in, but once again, they were doing PR. Anyone could have called in this anonymous tip. The bottom line, whoever called in this tip stopped a possibly horribly brutal, senseless attack on a bunch of innocent people. So whoever called in that tip did genuinely, like, a really amazing feat. Randall Shepard would receive a 10-year sentence after pleading guilty to the conspiracy to commit murder, and is now currently released and off parole, but is barred from using the internet for the rest of his life. Which I have a lot of logistic questions about that. I will be looking up on my own, but that's, wild. 3 years after the initial arrest, Lindsay would plead guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and arson. She would be sentenced to life. And in the greatest piece of irony, she was sentenced on April 20th, the anniversary of the Columbine high school shooting and the birth date of her favorite Nazi. That, it puts a smile to your face to hear it. Now, these kids, the 13-year-old I mentioned earlier and Natalie, these are just a random couple outliers, This was the most prolific group of active, vaguely known Tumblr users that participated in something. And the aforementioned two were literally this year, and I believe it was December of last year. Like, this is a constant, prevalent occurrence. These are just a handful. I know there's a really, really well-known one too in 2019. I believe it was a 19-year-old girl. Her name was Soul, and she's now become an icon in the Columbiner community, just like James and Lindsay have, of people want to look like her and make edits of her, where she bought 3 one-way tickets to try to throw off the police somehow, even though she, kind of made it really clear she was threatening to shoot up Columbine High, to the point that the county of Jefferson that Columbine High was in had all the schools out until they located this woman, who they found had shot herself with a gun she bought at a Little Tin gun shop as her own sick little nod to Columbine, instead of being able to carry out an insane, senseless school shooting attack after her heroes, Eric Harrison, Dylan Klebold. This is a constant phenomenon that has now been occurring for at least 15 years. And that's just 15 years of people who have been online and active in Columbine. You will see constant news articles. There was someone, I believe, at Columbine High a week after the shooting occurred that they found with a hit list. This became such a point of influence to already existing violent teens that now had something to, blueprint off of. But outside of already existing violent individuals who just want to take interest in anything violent, why do children become attracted to Columbine? Why do people become Columbiners? I think it's the false sense of relatability. They attach their own sadness, anger, and anxieties onto them, usually through the writing in their journals. Being a teenager isn't easy by any means. Everything feels like it's the end of the world, that nothing will ever pass. And feeling not alone is severely hard. So when you're in this angry, sad space, and you see or read something that resonates to how you feel, you're going to be attracted to it. And once you find others who resonate with the same way you're feeling and how someone else put it, you're going to want to have some connection to them. It's going to be so easy to build a form of community. And I think a lot of these kids feel like they can't get a sense of community outside of the school shooter community. It's a total misplacement of their own anger onto the actions and existence of Eric and Dylan. I also think it's such a hotspot of community because of just how much content there is out there. I'm not kidding you. This is like on Roblox. Like, if that's the bar of how children get content access to them, it's literally there. As well as TikTok. What spawned me to do this video again, because it is a redo, is because I was scrolling my own TikTok and saw some school shooter related fan edit kawaii bow hyperpop over pictures of like Kip Kinkle and TJ Lane. Like, this is an ever constant presence on the internet, especially on children's internet. One of the researchers at the Institute of Strategic Dialogue, Francis Wright, in a study relating to Columbine content online appealing to the youth, said, quote, "The abundance and types of materials that the killers produced resonate with young people in a way that we haven't really seen with other school shootings, which has allowed it to perpetuate and live on all these years later," unquote. Also, the Columbine shooters are obviously the most prevalent one and the one we're really focusing on, but like, it's all shooters. Like, I remember, once again, back when I was on Tumblr, the Columbiners were waiting and fiending for the photos to drop of Dylan Roof once that shooting occurred. Like, it's anyone. Adam Lanza has a slew of fangirls. Everyone comment that I said the word slew. Like, anyone who has picked up a gun and was a vaguely young white male has blogs dedicated to them, and they will make it into the compilation fan edit with barely human edited on top and, glitterfy gifs all over it. And I'm sure you may have caught on or noticed, I've chosen to block out the usernames of all these accounts because all the ones that do have ages are children, and 90% of them have listed that they are a literal child. And I'm not here to promote bullying children on the internet, especially because they don't really understand. And I'm sure you're at home and you're like, oh, well, when I was 12, when I was 13, like, I completely understood. I knew. That's really awesome. Some don't. They just don't comprehend, especially when they're just fed this constant information about them in a non-negative light. If their first exposure to a school shooting that happened 15 years before they were alive is from seeing posts on the internet, they're not really going to have the full connection. And especially with how normalized school shootings are in America, they just don't understand. They're children. And I'm not going to, once again, I'm not going to advocate or hold children responsible for making shitty fan art on the internet about people they shouldn't. And when I discussed this previously, a lot of people who used to be involved in this community commented, reaching out, stating, how they ended up in it. And almost everyone they resonated. They resonated with writings of teenagers being upset, hurt, sad, alone. That's what most teenagers feel at one time or another. You read the wrong thing at the wrong time and you get caught up into something sometimes. And it's not that quick of an escalation. This is a type of radicalization in a different sense than what, you're probably used to. They get radicalized into having this parasocial relationship with the school shooter just because of the community they found themselves in. And almost all the ones that talked about it now are like horrified they ever did that. They obviously denounce and they don't advocate for any of that. And they're genuinely embarrassed that was something that was part of their identity as a teenager online that, once again, they themselves expressed they just didn't understand truly how awful it was. In the past 25 years, there's been 2,279 school shootings in the US. 55 already this year. And it's hard to ignore that more and more times we find that they were online coveting previous shooters. But there really is no stopping it. They're moving to sites like Discord and Telegram, and anytime a blog's deleted, there's 10 other behind it. And once again, not everyone who's involved in this is going to go out and commit violent acts. But with the amount we have on the record that did and have, it is undeniable that we can't act like this is some sort of breeding ground for violence. That was the school shooter fan club of Tumblr.com. Have you ever heard of this subset of community? Have you seen postings like this? Once again, this is a redo, so you probably may have already heard this story from me before, but, make sure to comment down below all your thoughts, feelings, and experiences surrounding that, because, I was born in 99, so Columbine's always been, a past later reference to me, but I know I have an older audience on here, so a lot of you are probably in school, maybe, when Columbine happened, which is, I can't even imagine, so, make sure to leave a comment down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Members see videos early. Members always do mean the most. And with that, if you like this video, you'd probably like my video about the disturbing video game genre. Follow me on all social media platforms at Darby Valentines. I'll see you next time. Bye.